right, good afternoon, everybody. How are you? Good, good. So I'm excited. This is our inaugural GME Grand Round. Dr. Hasty is the Dean and Chief Academic Officer of the Orlando College of Osteopathic Medicine. He earned his Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine from Nova Southeastern University and completed his internal medicine residency at Mount Sinai Medical Center, where he served as Chief Intern and Chief Resident and received multiple Resident of the Year honors, including Howard Kane Resident of the Year, being the first osteopathic physician ever to win that award in over 40 years of academic medical training at Mount Sinai. Dr. Hasty began his career as a hospitalist and internist for Cogent Healthcare at Lee Memorial Health Systems in Fort Myers, Florida. He soon became associate lead physician for Cogent Healthcare. Dr. Hasty had what we described as a calling to become an academic physician and joined NSU College of Osteopathic Medicine in March of 2005. He served as the founding program director of the Palmetto General Hospital Internal Medicine Residency Program and helped develop several other graduate medical education programs. Dr. Hasty has since held major leadership roles in medical education, including serving as Vice President of Medical Education at Campbell University, Jerry M. Wallace School of Osteopathic Medicine, creating 383 residency positions, and founding Dean of the Idaho College of Osteopathic Medicine. He is board certified in internal medicine and is a master fellow of both the American College of Osteopathic Internists and the American College of Physicians. Please join me in welcoming our inaugural GME Grand Round speaker, Dr. Robert Hasty.
Yes. So thank you so much, Shawnette, and it's such a pleasure and honor to be the first inaugural GME Grand Round speaker, and of course we love graduate medical education here at OCOM, and part of the idea is with the GME Grand Rounds is to connect you with program directors, and I guess technically I'm a past program director, so I guess I sort of count a little bit here today. But Shawnette asked me to kind of give you this talk, and I've been giving this talk for like 20 years or something like that. 20 years ago, I got into medical education, and then, you've heard the term like street fighting or whatever. I was like the street advisor for like students coming up, how do I get into this residency and stuff? And so I've had my 10,000 hours of experience, advising, medical students over the years. And so I can tell you that I used to be on the board for the ACOI, American College of Osteopathic Interest, and they have this visiting professor program. And so I would go around, and so they started asking me to do this. And I said, well, what can I do to give value to prospective students? It's mostly M1s and M2s, across the country. And people kind of show up for like how to get into residency because, at the end of the day, this is what it's all about, right? Getting into the specialty of your choice and, getting your dreams. So hopefully, what I'm going to do over the first, say, half of the session, I'm going to go through just some introductory slides, just to kind of get the conversation going. But I love the questions and answers. That to me, that's the most fun part. So hopefully you guys have some questions and answers, and hopefully we'll have some fun on this today. So I will tell you. Okay. So I will tell you that these are the objectives that's found in the slides. The references are there. If you look at any of these references, they are incredible in terms of giving you all the sorts of data, the supporting data behind this. There's actually more data now than ever before on how to get into residency programs. So actually this picture right here, that was my residency program. So you can see me, I'm there in the far back. This was, actually we had a little graduation party. I was chief resident that year. Right next to, or actually over the far right is, or far left, I guess, is Neil Furman. He always wore like a short tie, so we kind of bought him like a clip-on tie as a joke that time, and he was wearing it very proudly, as you can see. But getting into the residency program that you're happy with, it's going to change your life, right? It's going to give you the opportunities to be the type of physician that you want. The relationships, the friends that I have from my residency program, I could have done anything in the world, right? With those relationships, the friendships, and to this day, I mean, it's impacted my life in ways. And I wish all of you the same success and luck with your residency choices and opportunities I've had. So I'll start off with the good news. So the good news is the osteopathic degree, as far as I can tell, has the highest job placement rate of any degree in America. I've not been able, and I've said this to a lot of people, and I've searched this, I've not been able to find another degree that has a higher job placement rate, meaning residency placement rate, than the DO degree. So this is the 2025 data. 99.12 of percentage of folks graduating from an osteopathic school seeking residency this past fall, spring had a job by July 1st, 2025, right? I mean, it's pretty remarkable, right? And if you go back and ACOM actually has it on their website every single year, it's always right around 98, 99% every single year. And this is, it was actually higher after the single accreditation system went through. So that, we have AC and GME. So this is the really good news. Obviously, you want to be in the green. You don't want to be in the blue. I'm convinced that some of those people in the blue that probably should never have graduated osteopathic school, they've had multiple board failures and they kept taking their tuition dollars and somehow ended up with a DO degree and stuff like that. But there's also some folks in there that probably could have gotten residency programs, if they would have listened to some of the advice we're going to talk about today. And the other thing is I want you to be in the happy green, right? It's one thing getting a residency program. It's another thing getting the residency program that you want, in the specialty that you want, in the geographic location that you want. So hopefully this advice will be helpful. My first piece of advice is do well on the boards. And by the way, 20 years ago when I got in medical education, or 21 years ago, I was applying for my first job in academics at Nova Southeastern. And I thought it'd be kind of funny. I held up the little sign. That was me, back when I was a hospitalist. I went, down the road and, by the stop sign, I had somebody take a picture of me. We'll teach medical students for food. And now I should have a new one that says, we'll be a dean for food or something, right? But I can tell you historically, the board scores are the most important aspect of getting into residency programs. Now, I can tell you things have changed, right? In 2022, both the COMLEX USA Level 1 as well as the USMLE Step 1 went pass fail. So I'll talk about how that changed things a little bit. But I can tell you, if you fail the boards, I mean, it's really, really tough, right? Any level of the boards, any, COMLEX Level 1, COMLEX Level 2, it's really tough to get into residency. It's tougher than ever, I would say. So if you don't get anything else from this, do well on the boards. Your time that you spend with Dr. Cody is well served. Probably the most important time that you can spend, right, preparing for the boards, right? Level 1, even though Level 1's pass fail, I can tell you, I talk to program directors literally every day. They just go into ARIS, they filter, ARIS is the application service for residency. They just go in there and they filter, by board failures, right? So, you don't want to be filtered out instantaneously on a board failure. So do well on that. Level 2, or Step 2 if you're on the MD side of things, but Level 2 for the DO students has become much, much more important because you still get a score from your Level 2 of scores. So if you're a program director, you want to, compare two candidates together. Level 2 is your game, right? And that's part of the reason why we mandated that, I think it's August 31st that they have to take it. That was based upon program director feedback. All the program directors, in fact, they were giving us feedback about another medical school in Florida that none of their students had their Level 2 scores back by, interview season or by application season. And they said, if you want to do one thing to help out OCOM students, make sure they take Level 2 by, August 31st. And we actually put it in policy, and that's being rolled out to you all right now. So do well on the boards. I can tell you, and they actually changed this, and I'll show you the current one. Actually, I pulled off, I took a screenshot yesterday of the current data, but this is the historic top 5 factors for applicants seeking interview. And this was prior to 2022, back when the boards were still for a score for Level 1. COMLEX USA Level 1, USMLE Step 1 was the #1 reason why people selected them for interviews. Number 2, letters of recommendation, right? I mean, little letters of recommendation, I'll spend some time talking about those, but they're a lot more important than you think, right? And I'll give you some strategies. Number 3 is MSPE. That stands for Medical Student Performance Evaluation, also called the Dean's Letter. Technically, no one's called the Dean's Letter for 25 years, but technically everybody still calls it the Dean's Letter. But it's still probably the thing. All of you should have gotten the OCOM process on the MSPE, what's included in the MSPE, what's not included in the MSPE. Of course, my job is twofold. Number 1, to try to represent you guys well on your Dean's Letter that you get into residency, but also it's, I have an ethical obligation to protect the public in the Dean's Letter. So it's sort of that duality type of thing. So, I'll do the best I can to represent you in a positive way. as long as it's reasonable and safe within, my ethical boundaries from that. Number 4 was level 2. I can tell you if they still had this rating, I'd almost guarantee that COMLEX level 2 and step 2 are probably number 1 right now in 2025. And then the personal statements, it's mind-boggling to me it was ever number 5, but according to the data, it was number 5. I can tell you as a former program director, I hardly ever read the personal statements, to be honest with you, but we'll talk about that. So this is the current data. I just pulled this screenshot off yesterday. I sent you the slides this morning so you can actually see it, but they actually don't put in the board scores on these top 5 or the top reasons why people are being considered for the application. But number 1 is the dean's letter, which is shocking. And I will tell you, I've read a lot of dean's letters out there before. It's always kind of funny. I had this one from one of these Ivy League medical schools. This person was applying my residency program, and they said this person is an excellent student, right, based upon the class rank. So I'm like, well, what does that mean, excellent class rank? So I go down the footnotes in 4-point font, and it says, okay, all of our students here are excellent, but if they're in the top quartile, they're terrific. If they're in the second, they're fantastic. And then this person was in the excellent, which was the 4th, the bottom quartile, but they said, our minimum standard's excellent or, whatever, right? So it's, you see how the medical schools try to game the dean's letters a little bit. Letters of recommendation, super important. It's always kind of funny, sometimes when I did read the letters of recommendation when I was a program director, and I've looked at thousands and thousands of applicants for residencies. I can tell you that it's so funny that say the main reason why I applied to your medical school or why I want to go to medical school is blank. And I'm like sitting there, okay, this is residency. You couldn't take the 30-second update to say residency instead of medical school. So you do have to pay attention to your personal statement. And I think both Gemini, last time I checked, Gemini and Chat had mechanisms in place that they actually wouldn't write your letters of recommendation anymore. I don't know if that's still the case. Grades and required clerkships. Yeah, so it's important. Class ranking, grades in clerkship and desired specialty, audition or elective rotations. That's why when we talk about these audition rotations, the golden months, why they're so important. Personal prior knowledge of the applicant, consistency of grades, and you can read the rest on your own. This is the reasons or the factors that they decide who to rank. So these are the reasons why they put them on the rank order list. And this is important, right? Number 1, interpersonal skills, right? Nothing to do with grades, board scores, or anything else like that. Do they like you? Can you work together as a team with the other residents? Number 2, interactions with faculty during interview and visit, right? That's number 2, right? Again, it's that affability factor, right? Something that it's kind of tough to teach people how to be affable, but probably one of the required readings for medical school should be like how to win friends and influence people or something like that. But believe it or not, it's super important. Number 3, interactions with house staff. Again, all very subjective interpersonal skill stuff. Number 4 is the dean's letter. Number 5 is class ranking, which, by the way, we have a pass-fail system, but there's a reason why we give a class rank. All the program directors want it. Everybody we talk to. If we did not give you a class rank, you'd be dead in the water applying for a residency program. Yeah, Dr. Chad.
Does that vary? Do you give the number, or do they only get a quartile from you, or can they tell you what they want, decile?
Right. So right now in our process is that we give you it's a quartile rank. It's a quartile rank. Yeah. So, but again, we'll try to doctor up as much as possible. So, terrific, excellent, fabulous, one of those type of things. So I'll try to present you guys in the most favorable light. So, but again, very, very subjective stuff here, right, for the rank. Yeah. Yeah, John. Yeah. Yeah, if you could use the button, but I'll repeat it so you don't have to, John. But for the future, if you have any other comments, so I can tell you that how do you compare class rank, right? So somebody that may be best in their class at PCOM, versus best in the class at OCOM. Well, of course the OCOM's better, right? But that's I will tell you that is part of our strategy here at OCOM. That's the reason. So I'm in the process of inviting every single residency program director in the state of Florida for a VIP tour of OCOM. Believe it or not, there's 819 residency program directors in the state of Florida. That's why you see me on all these freaking VIP tours all the time. Right? That's a lot of them. And, now they're on our newsletters and they're getting, holiday cards and stuff like that, but try to build those relationships to do it. I can tell you, when I was a residency program director, there were 2 new medical schools in Florida during the time I was program director. Not a single reach out. I didn't know anything about their curriculum. I didn't know how good they were and everything. And yeah, so I would get these, and they wanted me to take their applicants, right? And then of course, the first time I'm hearing from the school or the dean, it was like, hey, I've got this great person, right? Okay, all right. And the more hyperbole, usually the worse the board scores are, right? And I'm like, okay, all right, and of course, I didn't mean enough to them to talk to me ahead of time. But I did, when they were trying to get a struggling student into residency program, right? So hopefully that will do that. But yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason why they want the class rank, because are they top of the class at one school? Well, maybe they're top of the class at another school. But yeah, absolutely, medical school reputation plays a major role. And that's why all of us are, we're in this boat together, right? The better reputation we can develop for OCOM, the better it's going to help each of you actually. So, so I will tell you, you look at historic pass rates or historic placement rates or match rates, the people that have the higher COMLEX USA level 1 prior to 2022, much more likely to get matched than those with the lower scores. So what we think, and again, the data is not out there because they don't publish it anymore because they're trying to move everybody over this holistic way of looking at things. What we think is probably level 2s in that place. So again, pass level 1, and rock level 2, right? I mean, that's the assignment, right? So, and of course, this is, I think this is also a pretty interesting correlation. And I can actually show you some different data in terms of competitiveness of residency. But I can tell you, number 1 is always like orthopedic surgery and neurosurgery. Dermatology's up there, radiology. The only thing that's different in here, if you look at psychiatry has a pretty low board scores. I guarantee if they publish the data right now, psychiatry is going to be really high. It was amazing. If you would have told me 7 years ago that psychiatry was going to be more competitive than emergency medicine, you would have blown me over with a feather, right? I would not have believed it. But now 100% psychiatry is more competitive than emergency medicine. And I think most of it's, well, part of it is income went up and also lifestyle dramatically improved with psychiatry. In the old days of psychiatry, I mean, you were sitting there, rounding in some psych hospital or, office encounter after office encounter. And now you're doing a lot of Zoom and a lot of concierge type of practices by Zoom and stuff like that. So psych has become super popular. But in general, the higher the income, the more competitive the specialty. So, orthopedic surgery, one of the highest incomes out there, one of the most competitive residency programs. I will tell you this, I do not believe in 2025 that there is a compelling reason for an osteopathic medical student to take the USMLE Step 1. And we can talk more, maybe this would be good in our Q&A session afterwards. But this would be if my daughter was sitting here, this would be my advice to her. I don't see any reason for you to take a pass-fail USMLE Step 1. The program directors are not going to give you any favor because you took a pass, because you got a pass on the USMLE Step 1. Everybody else applying their program got a USMLE Step 1 pass. So, it means nothing. Oh, you got a pass on COMLEX, terrific, right? So I would not, and ask any program director, I don't think anybody will tell you to take, after 2022, take USMLE Step 1. Step 2, very few of you, I think, should ever take USMLE Step 2, but that's, since we don't really have any people making that decision today. But if you want to take USMLE Step 1, absolutely, we'll sign off on it. But it's like a day, it's extra money for you, it's extra stress for you, and there's a 13% chance, I think it's a 13% chance that you'll fail it. And that has to be reported on your ARIS. It's actually part of the terms and conditions of your residency application. And you have a 13% chance of it significantly hurting you. If it was me, if it was my daughter, I would advise not to take USMLE Step 1. Number 2, and this is like one of those crazy things. And by the way, I'm obsessed with like top 10 lists. So of course, this is a top 10 list. This is probably one of the most important pieces of advice I'm going to give you. Okay, you need to make your choice of your specialty or specialties, right? You can have a first specialty choice, a second specialty choice. You need to decide what you want to do by January 1st of your third year. And you're going to say to me, well, that's not fair because I've only gone through 6 months of clinical rotations. I haven't even rotated on, XYZ specialty, or I haven't had a chance to do any electives yet or whatever. Yes, but if you really want to get to the specialty that you really want to get into, you kind of need to know your specialty so you can start shopping, you can start preparing letters of recommendation, all this stuff over the spring. What I see people that are disadvantaged with is when they wait, they don't know what they want to do. They're, whimsy on their ideas and stuff like that. They don't have their act together because there's something called the VSLO, visiting student, whatever the visiting student application service, VSAS, VSLO. You kind of have to start doing that in the spring so that you can go ahead and do those audition rotations that you want and research the programs, networking, all these type of things. So make sure that you do it. And by the way, I have ERIS up there. That's the Electronic Residency Application Service. The vast majority of you, or majority of you, will be applying through there. There's also something called the Residency CAS now. And the Residency CAS is for all the emergency medicine residencies and all of the OBGYN residencies. So the problem is, like, say for instance, OBGYN is your first choice. Well, you're going to have to apply through residency CAS. But let's say family medicine is your second choice. You're going to have to apply through both residency CAS and ERIS. And, there's money associated with both, right? So yeah, this is the most complicated job interview in your entire life, right? And I can tell you, it doesn't get any easier, right? Been doing this over 20 years right now, and I can tell you, advising medical students, it gets more complicated all the time. And wait till I talk about signaling and everything in a few minutes, right? It's so complicated. But January 1st, and by the way, that's back when I used to, I started ICOM, Idaho's first medical school. That was the potato on January 1st. So they literally drop a potato on January 1st. So again, when the potato drops on January 1st of your third year, have your decision made. So I don't know, what do we do I've lived here in Central Florida for over 5 years.
Orange?
Do we do an orange? I've never seen it. Oh, cool. All right, so when the orange drops. So yeah, actually, this is like one of those references, like the vast majority of the people in this room won't know what I'm talking about. But it's like one of my favorite movies, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Life. Oh, it's awesome. It's on Netflix, I think. Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. Absolutely the reason why each of you, whether you're M1, you're M2, whoever you are, I happen to be I'm in an M30 this year. So regardless of where you are, you got to think about this because I'll tell you, medical school goes in a blink of the eye. And that January 1st of your third year will be here in a second. So number 3 is to have a reality check on your specialty. And so this is one where you need to really look. So if you fail level 1, which, Dr. Cody's promised me that nobody is going to fail level 1 in this room, right? But if you fail level 1, he's giving me a thumbs up, by the way. If you fail level 1 and you want to go in orthopedic surgery, my questions for you are, is your aunt or your uncle a program director of an orthopedic surgical residency program? If the answer is no, you probably are not going to be an orthopedic surgeon, right? So I mean that I'm telling you, you gotta have to have reality checks, and it's good. Maybe you do want to look at one of the lesser competitive specialties, right? And you'll be happy with that, right? I mean, it's not the end of the world. I can tell you, I had this girl. She was sitting on top of I think 1 or 2 board failures. I can't remember. I think she had 1 board failure. She wanted to go in general surgery more than anything in the world. She had been invited to exactly 1 residency interview. And it was the place that she was rotating at as a student. That was her only surgical residency interview. And I'm telling her, I'm like, apply to something else. She said, I'd rather be a barista than do anything besides general surgery, right? And I'm like, the chances of you getting into that one place that's giving you the interview is like 0, right? I mean, I guess all things are possible, and I'm praying for you, and I wish you the best. But I would not be in that position. You should have like 13 interviews to be placed. So she goes ahead and takes the chances. And of course, she doesn't get accepted. She's calling me, she's crying, I'm crying, right? And I'm like, and then, she says, okay, I'm going to apply for family medicine the next cycle, which she did. And, and she's like super, super happy. She said, I would have been miserable if I would have went into general surgery. And, so life is okay, right? I mean, it works out. You're probably going to be happy with whatever specialty you go into, but, she could have made some better choices and not sit out for a whole year, right? Um, yeah, anyway, I thought this was one. This was an old study looking at most competitive residency for DO students match. But I know nowadays the numbers are about the same. Interventional radiology is really tough to get into. Ortho's tough, neurosurgery, derm, general surgery. Yeah, general surgery is like 50%, right? So it's more competitive than most people think. Letters of recommendation, historically, the second most important factor for prospective interviews. I can tell you, for when you send off your letter of recommendation, and by the way, you can have letters of recommendation for family medicine, letters of recommendation for emergency medicine, and letters of recommendation for ortho, however many specialties you want. And I think per specialty, I don't know, there's a limit, I think maybe like 10 letters or something like that. But you can say, okay, I want these 3 letters to go to this, 3 letters to that, and they're all blinded. So you ask somebody, hey, write a letter of recommendation for me. You have no idea what they're going to write because it goes straight into ARIS. So you have no idea so be careful, right? If someone writes a bad letter for you, I mean, it could bomb you. So be careful when you ask somebody. And if you're like one of those people that have like low self-awareness, you're not sure what other people feel about you, make sure you ask them, what do you really feel about me? And if they say, oh, I think you're like the best thing since sliced bread, would you mind writing that letter of recommendation? Or if they think, oh, well, you've come a long way, probably not your best choice to write a letter of recommendation for you, right? Because I can tell you, I've received those as a program director, and like, this student struggles and stuff. That person's dead in the water, and they wondered why they're on, on scramble day and they can't get a freaking spot, right? They didn't match. It's probably because of some letter of recommendation. And ideally, you want somebody that's like, maybe even add that residency program. I can tell you, you guys know Tintinelli's emergency medicine textbook. Anyway, it's sort of the Bible for emergency medicine. It's the red and white book. I guess people still have the physical book. Sometimes in the ER, they have it in case, I guess, it goes down or whatever. But anyway, Judith Tintinelli, she practices, or she at least used to practice at UNC. She's considered like, like the god of emergency medicine. So one of my advisees, he actually used to be a VIP tour guide over at Disney, believe it or not. This was back when I was at Nova Southeastern, but he was just doing, he got bummed out. He went up to UNC for audition rotation, and they said, oh yeah, you got to do, weekend nights or whatever. And he was kind of bummed out about that. Sure enough, his first night was Judith Tintinelli. The second night was Judith Tintinelli. She was doing nights in the UNC system up in North Carolina. And anyway, he like, like the first time he met her, he's like, you're the Judith Tintinelli? And she's like, yeah. And anyway, he really worked hard. She like loved him. She was like, I didn't know about DOs before you, but I like you, or whatever, right? And he says, hey, would you mind writing a letter? And she said, absolutely. And she said, like, terrific medical student or whatever. He would go on interviews, and they would see that, Judith Tintinelli herself wrote a letter of recommendation, and they were like, they would spend like half the interview with like, well, what was she like? And so, that was that. So, if you have people like that, I'll give you another secret. Have the chief resident of that residency program write your letter. Every residency program I've ever seen has the chief resident in the room when the decision's being made. If that chief resident's in the room and they write a letter and it's really positive, they're not going to say anything bad about you. You pretty much got a ticket in, right? Or at least a pretty good chance that you're going to get a rank, at least in my opinion. So, you want positive letters specifically on your top programs. And if you can get like a Judith Tintinelli of the world, that's probably not a bad thing, right? Jeff Brown. So my favorite medical student ever, his name was Jeff Brown. He rotated with me. This was actually before I even went in full-time academia. I was a hospitalist in West Coast of Florida, and I was rounding around this medical student, Jeff Brown, they assigned to me. And, I don't know if you ever read The House of God. If you haven't, you should read The House of God before you graduate medical school. I think every medical student should read The House of God by Samuel Shem. It's a great book. It's a little cynical, but it's a great book. Anyway, it says if you have a medical student that doesn't double your workload, you kiss the ground they walk on, and I think it's a little bit true, and so Jeff Brown was one of those people that actually made it amazing, right? And so he came up to me on the first day. He says, Dr. Hasty, I want to be the best medical student you've ever worked with. I'm like, okay, that sounds pretty good, right? I was like, okay, great, And he says, well, you give me feedback if I'm not the best medical student you've ever worked with. And I'm like, okay, I'll give you that feedback. And then, of course, he hooked me on the third thing. He says, if I'm the best medical student you ever worked with, yeah, would you write me a letter of recommendation? I'm like, well, if you're the best medical student I ever worked with, of course I'm going to write you a letter of recommendation. And so, and he was great. I mean, he was really, really good. So the first week goes by, he comes up to me and says, what can I do better? And I said, well, your HPIs, you could write them a little bit longer. So then the next week he's like sitting there, they're like 2-page H&Ps, HPIs and stuff like that. The following week he comes up to me and was like, Dr. Hasty, what can I do better? And I said, well, your family history, you could probably elaborate a little bit more on your family history. Because I'm like running out of stuff, right? He's really that good, right? And so next thing you know, he's like doing all these genetic diagrams of the family history and stuff like that in the charts. And the third week rolls around and he was like, what could I do better? And I'm like really running out of stuff because he was that good, right? And I just read this article that, if the physician, smiles, with the patient, there's more trust and, there's better therapeutic outcomes or whatever. So anyway, he's walking, I tell him that he's walking around, like smiling, everywhere and everything. And so, the fourth week, I was like, yeah, you're awesome. I gave him pass of the honors. And he said, would you write me a letter? I said, of course. And so in the letter I wrote, this is the best medical student I've ever worked with. And then I was in the doctor's lounge, like, maybe like a month later, and I'm sitting there like, with like the OB/GYN and general surgeon and stuff. We were sitting there eating and somebody brought up Jeff Brown. And I said, yeah, you guys know Jeff Brown? And they said, yeah, he said if he was the best medical student ever, if I write a letter, I'm like, yeah, he did that same thing. He'd done it to all of us. So he had all these letters that said it was the best medical student ever. So I could just imagine like the program directors like interviewing this guy, right? Like every letter was like the best medical student ever, right? I mean, how could he not get in? Of course, he got into UT Memphis. He's actually a pediatric cardiac anesthesiologist at UT Memphis, living his best life. I just talked to him a couple of years ago, and I'm friends with him on Facebook. He's got the family, even the golden retriever. I mean, everything worked out perfect for Jeff Brown. So you work hard, good things happen to you, right? So that's Jeff Brown. Number 5, apply to plenty of programs. So chances are you probably applied to 9 medical schools. I know that because that's like ACOMA's data. In fact, for the current cycle, it's 9.3 designations per applicant to DO schools. I can tell you for residency programs, you get applied more. How many more? Well, primary care, typically about 30. Surgery, typically about 100. So it just depends. And of course, the signaling is changing that. The average for the osteopathic category is 78. That is changing a little bit with signaling, which I'll talk in a moment. But you definitely want to have some stretch programs, go for the brass ring, go for that orthopedic surgery that you want to go to, but also go for that rural, less competitive program that you may want to go to too, right? Have that safety program. And it's amazing. Sometimes when you learn about that safety program, it turns out to be like the perfect fit. I can't tell you how many times I've had that happen where, people wanted to go to some big brand named hospital. Then they actually do an audition rotation there. They find out it really sucks. And then they go to that community hospital that was like lower on their list, and they find out that place is amazing, right? Everybody's, really nice to them and treats them well. So number 6 is the plan for interview season. So the golden months are called golden for a reason. Number 1, they're golden because they're your golden opportunity for getting in a residency program, but they're also goldenly expensive, right? So you got to budget, accordingly. Most schools will actually have $5,000 or $10,000 extra, during your 4th year to allow for that. We've actually tried to maximize your rotations, your elective rotations the 4th year. I wanted to give you all 7 of your rotations, the 4th year elective rotations. The problem is we get so much feedback from the ER docs because the ER, it's a national thing for ER to be a 4th year rotation. So we talked to program directors, hey, can we put ER in the 3rd year? The answer from all of them was the same. No, we will not take your students for 3rd year core rotations for ER. We only want 4th years for core rotations. So that's why that's why that's your only rotation the 4th year. All the rest of them are electives, right? And of course the logistics. I mean, you kind of got to be like your little mini own travel agency for some of these things and figure out where you're going to stay on some of these, if you want to go far. Hopefully you all want to stay here because it's a lot easier logistically, but of course, love for you wherever you want to go. We support you either way. So number 7 is the golden months. So I can tell you golden months in our addition rotations are typically in the fall, and I'd say that probably your golden months are probably from like maybe August through December, but probably really it's like, September through November, those are your best ones, right? And so you schedule your really ones that you really, really want to go to the most, September, October, November. If your core rotation happens to fall in there, yeah, it's sorry, bad luck, right? But for the most part, you want to try to get as many of those rotations that you really want to go to because it makes a difference. I mean, some of these places will not even interview people if they aren't scheduled for an audition rotation, or they give you a much higher preference if you actually go there. And so it makes a big difference. So Ben Franklin, and by the way, if you haven't read Ben Franklin's autobiography, you probably should sometime in your life. It's an incredible book. But he has a great piece of advice for marriage, which I think is good. Before you get married, keep your eyes wide open. After you get married, keep your eyes half shut. And so I think that's true, right, with residency programs. So listen. So when you're there on an audition rotation, a golden month, and every person in the residency program is telling you this place sucks, it's toxic, don't come here, you might want to listen. If every person's telling you this place is amazing, you should come here, you might want to listen too. So yeah, it's golden. It's an audition rotation. They're auditioning you, but you're also auditioning them. But be careful, you're there a lot, right? And if you're like if you have some jerk tendencies, you got to be on your best behavior that entire time, right? You really do have to, be in your zone. Number 8 is prepare for interviews. It's amazing. I would have medical students, and this is back when medical student or interviews for residency program used to be in person. Although there's a talk right now that actually maybe they may be transitioning them back in person. But right now they're mostly Zoom remote, across the country. There's some pre-recorded video interviews, and Sean, I can get to those details with you. But for the most part, they're all Zoom. But I was always amazed, like these people, they want to come to this residency program so bad, and maybe it's, their whole life is that. And I ask them like the simplest questions, like, why do you want to come here? Why do you want to go in this specialty? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? Why do you want this program? And they fall apart, right? These are the simplest questions in the world. And so you really have to prepare. So take it seriously. I know we're going to do some audition-oskies or whatever for you before you actually interview for the programs, but just make sure you take it seriously. Like, really, you want to come off affable, friendly. You have to think about some of these questions ahead of time. I'm not telling you to like be scripted or interviewed. I mean, you want them to come off authentic, right? But you have to think about these things ahead of time, and you can't just do this all on the fly. Number 9 is you want to maximize your offer. So, I put the word up there called signaling. Again, part of the reason why this is the most complicated job interview in the world. So if you want to go into internal medicine, I think the number of signals is 8, right, Shawnette? I think, yeah, somewhere around there. Yeah, and family, I think, is a little bit more, and I think ortho is like 5 or 6 or something like that. And so, if you want to go into one of those specialties, they give you a certain number of signals. So let's just say it's 8 for internal medicine. Well, you give your first 8 out to your top 8 on your list, right? Yeah, but of course, there's number 9, there's number 10, and of course, you come to the program, and it's a little bit like dating theory, right? If they feel like you don't want them, they probably don't want you, right? So playing hard to get doesn't work in dating. It doesn't work in getting into residency, right? You got to show the love, right? But why do I think you see me showing a lot of love to all of our program directors and friends here at OCOM. You got to show the love, right? That's how you develop relationships. And so you've already, if they're not a signal, they feel like you're not loving them. Of course, every medical student says, oh, well, I didn't know how great this place was after I wish I still had saved another signal. I could give you a signal because you're so great or whatever. But that's one of the challenges there days. So you got to carefully plan your signals. You also want to closely communicate with the program directors and the coordinators. I mean, you don't stalk them. You don't want to be like creepy or anything, but that program director makes the decision. The program director is actually like much more powerful than the dean of a medical school. I mean, when I was a program director, I mean, I controlled everything, right? I mean, they make every decision. Now, of course, they have faculty and they have the team and stuff. The coordinator sits in every single meeting, right? That residency coordinator, she can, or they can, or he can sync you. So if that person says, oh, that person was rude or something to me, you're done. I mean, that's like an instant denial every residency program. And I've been in a lot of these decision meetings, over the years. One of the staff members says that you're a jerk, you're done. So you got to be careful. So those are your customers, but they can also be your best friends. Like, hey, yeah, this Thomas Setti guy was great. He was nice. We really should take him or whatever. I'll tell you that the voice from the coordinator can make all the difference in the world. And then you also want to maximize your safety programs, because you want some safety programs to rank you. Because you don't want to be sitting there, with me and the rest of the team and Shawnette. We're gonna have like this mission control room or whatever during scramble week. It's they call the SOAP process when you scramble into residencies. And we're gonna be sitting around and kind of helping support you, and mental health counselor is gonna be there with you. You don't want to spend time with us then. You want to be like, Natch, I'm not sure which one. I won't find out till Friday, but I'm in a good position. That's where you want to be. We want that room to be empty too. We don't, we just kind of want to just not have, not have any challenges. Obviously applying to programs that are close, close to here where there's relationships, sometimes that's helpful. Maximize your audition programs, make sure that you show them all the love and make sure you do a good job on those audition rotations. Networking really helps. And I can tell you that that old DO thing really helps, right? So you look at the program and, maybe they have a couple DOs, you call up the DO in the program, hey, you're a DO, I'm a DO, secret DO handshake. It helps, it does help. So definitely use these skills. And then number 10 is you want to strategically rank programs. So successfully matched applicants typically rank between 11 and 13 programs. That means they went on 11 to 13 interviews, right? So if you're not getting 11 to 13 interviews, you might want to think about specialty or geographic location, or Nebraska is a lovely place to live for 3 years or whatever, right? So which is okay, right? But be very careful, right? Anything you put on that rank order list, you know how tough it is to transfer medical schools. I mean, it's like almost impossible to transfer a medical school, right? Same thing's true with the residency. So when you make that commitment, I mean, it's harder than a divorce, right? I mean, you're really committed there for 3 to 5 years or however long that program is. I mean, so you're there. Have I seen transfers? Yes. It's super rare. So you don't want to ever bank on that. Do not put on your rank order list a place you're going to be miserable at. You would have been better off in the scramble, right? So do not ever rank a program that you do not want to spend 3 to 5 years of your life at. If the place sucks, the geographic location sucks, the people, every resident was telling you this place is toxic, don't come here. Those are the things you really want to listen to. So just be very careful. And besides, you have to sign the contract within, I think it's 30 days or 14 days, right, Shawnette, of getting matched. So it's a legal commitment that you're doing. Otherwise, they exclude you from the rank for over a year, or for a year, and you're stuck. I mean, that means like next cycle, you're pretty much out of play. So you don't really have a choice. So, that rank order list is really a contract, and it's a signed contract. So be careful. So I want to open up the questions and thoughts and comments, and this is my favorite part. So, yes.
Signaling, you said like if you signal them, or you don't signal them, it could be like bad dating or whatever.
Right.
But like, because I'm interested in anesthesia, they have like 15 signals. So what do you like recommend just applying straight to 15? Because you apply to more than 15, not signaling them, and they're like, are you committed, are you not?
Yeah, so and these are little details. I'm sorry, and I'll just repeat the question so that everybody can hear. So the question is, say for instance, you want anesthesiology, it has 15 signals. Do you just go ahead and throw your 15 signals out there? Do you try to hold back on some? How does that work? And these are the type of things when you're getting closer that we're going to be able to help support you on some of your strategy going through. I can tell you, at some point you're going to use up your signals. You're going to want to apply to, I don't care however many signals your profession has, you're going to want to apply to more residency programs than the signals you have. I told you, 11 to 13, ranks, typically are suggested. That means you applied to a lot more programs than that, on average 78 programs. Maybe you don't have to do all 78 programs, but you're going to have to do some more than that. And yeah, your conversation is going to be, yeah, I didn't send you a signal, but man, I'm really liking what I'm seeing today, or, whatever, right? I mean, authentically, without lying or whatever, you're going to have to sell them why you apply to this program, why you want to go to this program, and why they want to accept you. I mean, this is like persuasion at its like finest, right? I mean, you're basically, regardless of what people say, I mean, you're selling yourself during the interview to the residency program, and using your best persuasion skills. Like, you saw in there the interpersonal skills, interactions with faculty and staff. I mean, you got to come off. If there's no other days in your life that you have to be likable, those are the days you have to be likable, right? So hopefully that's helpful. But yeah, we'll give you more support as time coming up. Okay, what other questions, comments? Yes, John.
Oh, you see me. Outside of the 4 or 5 audition rotations you usually get, how do you basically pick out like residency programs to actually apply to, and then how do you pick out like those programs to actually rank if you don't get the chance to actually like rotate through?
Yeah, so great question. Yeah, so at the end of the day, how do you choose your audition rotations? I think number one, you got to do your research, and that's the reason why January 1st year, third year, you got to figure out what specialty you want. Anesthesiology, awesome. You can go ahead and start researching those programs, the geographic places. Oh, I like this place. My family's from here. I've been here. I love it. This place sucks. I'm not going to apply any program in that place. Those type of things you want to go. So then you get like sort of a list of your top geographic locales, and then you just pull up the list, right? And then you figure out, okay, well, what are my top 5? All right. But my top 5, I probably want a couple stretch programs, and I probably want a couple safety programs, and then maybe one in the middle. I mean, that's how I would do your 5 audition rotations, if that's how many audition rotations that you end up, how things work out. And then just go there, and then vote with your heart at the end of the day, right? If you go to a place and maybe it was your top choice from your audition, and you go there and it sucks, don't put it down. If you go to that safety place and it's like amazing, that's your number one. Yeah, who cares? Maybe it's not as fancy, or maybe the place isn't, the best reputation, whatever, right? But it feels right to you, go with your heart. And at the end of the day, I mean, it's like the medical school you go to. I mean, patients, are not going to ask what residency program you went to and stuff like that. Your happiness, your mental health happiness is like the most important thing, right? Your performance as a resident is going to be dramatically better if you're happier. If you're in a place that supports you, and they're kind to you, and it's a good environment, and you like living there and stuff like that. So, yeah. But you got to get into it. Yeah, that's that too. So what other questions? Check.
See if you pass step 1. It really doesn't matter. It seems like it's like one more week of studying. You only take it 7 days after you take the level 1. Doesn't seem like a big thing in big picture of this whole process.
Yeah.
Is it really just not at all looked at?
Yeah. So I'll repeat just to make sure everybody says, is step 1 really not looked at? So I can tell you, since it went pass fail, nobody really cares that much anymore. Like, so you passed the COMLEX level 1. I mean, you got to take COMLEX, right? It's a graduation requirement. You have to successfully complete COMLEX level 2 CE to pass to graduate from medical school. It's an accreditation requirement for us. So that means it's a graduation requirement for you. And so, so you have to take COMLEX USA level 1. But, is it going to hurt you? If you pass it, it's probably not going to hurt you. Maybe a little bit financially. What is it? $500-600 or whatever it is to take it. It's probably a day in your life. Pearson VUE, getting strip searched or whatever at Pearson VUE, or wherever they take the USMLE these days. And so, it's probably not the end of the world. But the problem is that, and there, up until before it became pass fail, I mean, there were literally osteopathic medical schools that were requiring their students to take step 1. There was, and my advice to a lot of students was, to take USMLE step 1. Nowadays, they really, it's pass fail. If you just pass the COMLEX, okay, fine. So, you can take step 2 without taking step 1. They're more than happy, except your $600 if you take just for level 2 or, level 1, step 2, step 1. So, but yeah, it's your call. But 13% of DO students do fail step 1. So, and some of it's just because they know it's not a required test. I don't think they study as hard or prepare as hard, or maybe they're not in the game as much or whatever. But the problem is that ERIS, the Electronic Residency Application Service, when you sign up to take it, you are obligated to report every board score. And then there's a mechanism for them to actually get it in from, and they can tell if you've taken it, from the national, the NBME or in NBME. So the answer is it's going to end up on your residency application service. And so don't fail. You never want to failure on your residency application. So what other questions? Yes, sir. Yeah.
What helped you decide that if your advice to make the choice by in the first semester, third year, what would help kind of
Yeah, and I'll repeat it just to make sure everybody heard it. So basically it's unfair to make for me to have to make a decision when I haven't rotated in that specialty, right? And I totally get it, right? I mean, this is a conundrum of every medical student in America, right? And, and of course, part of the challenge is that you'll never rotated through ophthalmology. You'll never rotated through, because those aren't core, specialties at most medical schools. Radiology is not a core at most medical schools. Neurology is a core at some medical schools, those type of things. And how do you know if you really haven't rotated through there? I mean, it's in some ways, it's a little bit like you choosing to go to medical school, right? I mean, you haven't spent time with an architect. You haven't spent time with an engineer. I mean, who's to say that? But the difference is you probably have some inkling. Of course, there's the careers in medicine that I know that Shawnette's, I guess making you do, or you have done already or something. I don't know. Giving you the privilege of doing. I'm sorry, Shawnette. And it's supposed to have it's supposed to kind of help you, guide your decisions. Although, the aptitude tests I always think are kind of funny. When I was in high school, I took one of those aptitude tests they made me take, and said I should have been like a custodian, which, I guess I would have. I probably would have been like a super happy custodian, but so I don't know, what the validity of some of these things are. But the nice thing is, you'll have the opportunities, especially when you get into third year. As one of our speakers on Friday, the regional site director, the white coat gets you into any door. You want to go spend time in pathology or radiology and stuff, you can figure out ways during the fall of your third year. But I'm not saying you have to, you're not locked in by blood or anything, but it's just good advice for you to start planning on where you want to go and planning your audition rotations, because that spring, and, Shawnette will tell you that VSLO, starts up pretty early in spring. So, anyway, but yeah, I know it's a tough test. Okay, I'll take one more question and I'll call it for today. Yes. Excellent. So the question is, how do you network? So, as far as networking with the individual programs, number one, I think, you got to talk to the folks, right? The more you can get out and have those connections, reach out. Obviously you're going to be doing some networking actually being there, right? When you do the audition rotations, try to introduce yourself to all the core faculty for the program, the coordinator, all the different administration for the program. Make sure the program director meets you and talks to you, and you tell them how much you want to, or him or her or they, how much you want to go into that residency program. Those type of things are very, very important. Have the people help you, like try to find advocates in the program doing that. I told you could do like that DO secret handshake thing. Sometimes that works. LinkedIn, those type of things, social media. Sometimes you can connect with people. Just try not to stalk them and try not to be creepy or anything like that. And then also, the faculty here, I mean, you have tons of physician faculty. They have friends everywhere. I mean, our faculty knows people everywhere. And I see Dr. Williams. It seems like Dr. Williams knows everybody, right? So you just, yeah, you're like 1 degree of separation from whoever you want to know just through Dr. Williams, right? So, so I think that those are, some opportunities. And I actually have a little networking, article on my blog, so if you go to the, blog, about networking, but yeah, and then take advantage of all these program directors that we're going to be coming in. Part of the reason why we're actually doing the GME Grand Round series is to introduce you to the folks. Yeah, like last night we had, OBGYN Club had this amazing session with Dr. Farideen and all of her residents. And, and she's like head of OBGYN for all of Advent Health. I mean, what a great friend to have, right? Melanie's, I think Melanie's made good friends with her already, right? I mean, can you imagine, like, if Dr. Farideen says, you're into Advent Health, you're probably into Advent Health, right? So it's, these are incredible networking opportunities. So with that, I see Shawnette's giving me the look. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, and good luck. Thanks.
All right, so we put up the QR code for evaluation. Those are really vital in us bringing in what you want. So if you can complete the evaluation on today's Grand Rounds, we'd like to thank you. We have a couple scheduled in the beginning, and next year we'll have a military one. Even if you're not in the military or planning, it's really good to come and hear some of the things, because you will be one day somebody's advisor. You will be somebody's mentor one day. And so for even me, I'm learning. Yes. What is this saying? I'll send you guys an email. I'll email it out to you guys. I probably copied the wrong link in there, so I'll send that all out to you. But if there is a specialty that you're not considering, I still want you to come to the Grand Rounds. Number one, your program directors know other program directors at their facilities. So a lot of times that is a good way when you ask about how do you network, how do you meet people, you go to all of them. Because there might be a pediatric, but you're going to go into family, but they know the family medicine program director, and like, oh, I met this really young person and they were really interested in doing that project or whatever. And there's different ways you get in, as we talk through our one-on-ones. If you haven't met with me yet, we'll talk through that. You really want to take the time and just kind of look at what is the best fit for you. Okay, so you want to look at your background, you want to look at the areas you want to be in, you want to be open to the areas. Like Dr. Hasty said, I thought I'm from Philly, I'm going to stay in Philly. Everything was Drexel, Hahnemann, loved it. I think when I went out to rural Alamogordo, New Mexico, it was the best hospital system I ever worked for. It was a nonprofit, it was community focused. There was, for all the residents, they got a complete breadth of cases. Our family medicine residents were able to do any OB cases they wanted to. They were able to do surgery cases. They were able to go to ortho. They were able to make those connections with the actual faculty. They used to hike with them, and it became one of the best programs I ever ran. It was really hard actually leaving it to come to Florida. But what I say is you never know what might be that hidden gem. We all know Mayo Clinic. We all know Cleveland Clinic. We all know these big Duke and all this stuff. I've had residents who have left programs only in my 20 years, 2 transfers ever have seen successful. And they went back to a program that was more community focused. So that's what I would say. If you have questions, you haven't met with me, please schedule time. I am adding more time month to month so you can meet with me, but I'm also adding after hours, after 5, before 8 to go around your classes, because I think that's a little bit better, some of the feedback I got. So thank you very much. It was great to see everybody's faces, and I will see you in a few months. Well, I'll see you tomorrow.